through culture kid. So I was born and raised in Italy, and both of my parents are from Bangladesh. And this is also something that I talk about in my book. I basically talk about my experience growing up in between two cultures, the Bengali one and the Italian one, and the struggles that I went through in trying to fit in. And I never felt like I was enough for either one of the culture. And it's something that I go really deep into the book, and I share my own personal experience, my own personal story of trying to belong to something, but then I was like, I don't belong anywhere. And I think the answer was that I had to just create my own belonging by understanding who I was as a person. And so I went through that.
Urmi, welcome to the Taste Toast Travel Podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you here today. And as we were talking and as I got to know you, I was just so intrigued by your work of, sharing some really diverse perspectives. And very much in your case, that is very much shaped by your own cross-cultural journey, which I'm very excited to get into. But you also have a podcast, which we will definitely get into. And I'm just so intrigued to hear some takeaways and learnings that you have had along the way. But again, with your own personal experience and background as well, I know you are going to just leave people feeling very inspired today. Let's just start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, and especially your background. And it sounds like you are now based in Montreal, and I would just love to know how you landed there.
Yes, I am based
Tell us
in
your life
in
story.
Montreal, Canada, and as I like to tell people, I am a corporate girl, a proud corporate girl. By day, I do work, and I do have a 9 to 5 job. I'm a finance professional, and it's something that I'm very, very proud of. But I also have all these different passions. I'm also a published author, speaker, fellow podcasters, a YouTuber. I also am part of an organization called Women in Leadership, and I'm the co-chair of the Montreal chapter. And I'm very much into also mentorship for other organizations. And to tell a little bit about my story, I am what we call a third culture kid. So I was born and raised in Italy, and both of my parents are from Bangladesh. And this is also something that I talk about in my book. I basically talk about my experience growing up in between two cultures, the Bengali one and the Italian one, and the struggles that I went through in trying to fit in. And I never felt like I was enough for either one of the culture. And it's something that I go really deep into the book, and I share my own personal experience, my own personal story of trying to belong to something, but then I was like, I don't belong anywhere. And I think the answer was that I had to just create my own belonging by understanding who I was as a person. And so I went through that struggle, and I think that struggle just became much bigger when I moved to Canada, because I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, probably, I will find a fit here, belong to something, but here I would just get labeled. And I think that's one thing that would bother me the most.
Mhm.
People would label me based on my accent, based on how I look. And that's when I realized that I didn't want people to tell my story, but it was me to share my story.
That's so beautiful. Oh my gosh. I definitely think so many people here listening, one way or another, whether it's they've, moved to a different country abroad and are just trying to assimilate or whatever their background is, can relate to that in some way. I would love, so obviously I want people to like go get your book, really dive in and read your story, but can you just give us a very high level of some of what you've experienced? I think this is very important to touch on, and just calling much needed attention to it and just like the types of things that you've experienced, because that must feel very isolating being in a country and just feeling like you just don't belong. That just makes me so sad.
Yeah, and I think that sense of belonging, it wasn't because people didn't want me to belong. It was just me not feeling like you belong. And
Yeah.
so for instance, like I went to a school where everyone around me was Italian, so there were not that many immigrant kids, and there was no one that looked like me. There was, like maybe I was looking for someone who had parents from a different country and they're born in Italy, someone that I could like open up to, but it was really hard back in the days. And it was always a big struggle for me, because I feel like I always like hang out with all of my Italian friends, and they would tell me, yeah, you're one of us, you're Italian, this and that. But then deep down, I was like, no, I'm not, because I don't look like everyone else. And then at home, even though like I look like everyone else, I was like, yeah, but I feel like my mentality is just the way I think is just clashing with the way everyone else thinks at home. So that too was a little bit of a struggle. And in my book, I talk about my experiences from a South Asian perspective, and I talk about things such as going to school that is strictly Catholic, and there is a church,
Mhm.
there are nuns, and you're like, who are these people? Especially because I wasn't told who these people are. It was like, okay, but this was like not my religion, so it was like that was one of the struggles. Then the other struggles was for instance, being the older sister and feeling the pressure of always being like the perfect girl and be an example for the whole community, especially because there were not that many girls of my age, and everyone was like much younger than me. So of course, so much pressure, so much expectation put on me because I'm the oldest one, and I have to, make sure that I do everything perfectly. And other things such as maybe we take for granted, but like let's say all of my high school friends, they would like get together, go out, but I was always told that I could not do it. And I thought it was like a religious thing that I was not allowed to like do any of these things, but it was more cultural things. And there was a perception that I was going to turn too Italian or too Western, that I was going to
Wow.
be brainwashed. So I remember like missing out a lot on this, I would say, teenage life that I wish I had experienced a little bit, but I was just following what I was told when I was growing up. I never rebelled against anyone. I thought that that was the way of doing things, and then I realized that no, I had really had to learn a lot of these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that is such an important thing to acknowledge, and I think many people go through that, right? That struggle of that feeling of, like, wanting to belong and fit in and follow what other people are doing, right? Or just simply go hang out with your friends or whatever is seems so innocent and so normal, right, for them, but then, again, just these cultural, expectations that we might have that kind of pull us in 2 different directions, and again, just at a very high level, how is a big question, but, like, how did you cope with that? How did you sort of navigate your way through that until you sort of got to this point where you're like, "I no, this doesn't feel aligned for me."
I think what I was doing is that I wasn't really living my authentic self when I was a kid, but I think I was not mature enough to even know what that was, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that, I would hang out with my Italian friends and I was like, yeah, I'm a cool kid and things like that. That's how I would think about it. And but I always had those thoughts. I always had them, and I knew that they would stay with me. But I never
Mm.
spoke about it with anyone because I was like, if I start talking about this with someone, they would like probably judge me because they're like, are you crazy? Why are you even thinking things like that? And so that was
Mhm.
like for me, it was like, okay, I cannot talk about it with my Italian friends because they probably won't get it. They
Right.
also had only one person that I was the only different person that we're hanging out with. And then I felt like I could not even talk about it with my Bengali friends, but I also did not have Bengali friends, to be honest, because I was the oldest one. And so that was always like a struggle. And I think I only managed to cope with this right now because I'm much older and I feel like moving to Canada, I got to meet people with different backgrounds, people
Yeah.
who can also like share my same experience. Maybe it's not, Bengali Italian, but maybe it's Indian African or other like ethnicity. And I feel like talking about this with them, I feel like I found my own tribe, I found my own community. And also talking about it, even different podcasts through my book, I feel like I found also pages on Instagram where there are people similar to me who talk about the struggles in like being in between, trying to fit in, struggling and finding a belonging. And I feel like we all go through that. And so that's how I managed to go through it. But I think I had to do like an inner work for a while.
I'm sure. Yeah, because so much of this, I've seen this a lot, is like it can be very deep rooted, right? So you're kind of
Mhm.
unpacking and sort of, for lack of a better term, undoing a lot of, just what you've been taught, which is absolutely beautiful and okay, right? We can respect where everyone kind of comes from, but yeah, that's a lot. But it sounds like community has really been
Yeah.
a big piece for you. And I know how important that is. Like there's a part of my life that is very involved in like grief and grief support and helping people that are grieving. And that's like one of the main things that so many people will say is like when they are grieving something or someone, or even not that, just going through a big life transition or moving to a new place where you maybe feel a bit out of place one way or another. And just like you said, I love it. You're finding your tribe, you're finding your people who maybe they don't, maybe to your point, like they're not the exact same background as you on paper, but they can just understand it at a very high level and just be like, I see you in that. And you're not alone. That's very powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if I could add further to that, I think one of the
Yeah.
things that I had to learn was the definition of home, especially because I have moved so many places since I was a kid. Like I was born in Sicily. We lived in Sicily for a bit, then moved to the north, went to the UK, came back to Italy. Like I was always changing
Wow. Okay.
schools, always changing cities, always changing houses. So that was
Mm.
something that I really had to learn. Like, what is it my home? Because now my parents live in the UK, so they went back, for instance, and UK is not my home because I don't have any memories from UK. I've not lived there for like I only lived there for a year.
Right.
And when I think about home, I feel like it's a feeling now. It's just my memories attached to growing up in Italy. But but sometimes this is, I think, what I crave the most is actually having a physical home
Mhm.
in the city where I was born and going back to the city whenever I want to, but I don't have a physical place to go because we
Yeah.
just change houses so many times. Like
Oh
I have
my
many
god.
houses, but that feeling of home, it's something that I think I crave a lot because
Mhm.
I would like to go back to my, to my bedroom, the place where I spent most of my time doing my homework, playing and so forth, but I don't have that, unfortunately. So
Yeah, that's so difficult. I feel like it can make people feel very just a bit untethered and sort of like, again, to your point, the kind of theme of this conversation so far is like, who am I? Like, where do I belong? Like, where can I, yeah, just call home. And it's definitely, I've talked to many people who have been through, their kind of similar thing. And it really is, I think for so many people, like the people, the community have a lot to do with it. Like you kind of just, like you said it beautifully, like just sort of redefining what you consider home and what that looks like and what that feels like. And you make a great point about like the whole childhood bedroom thing. Like I also don't really have that anymore. Like I grew up on the East Coast and like my parents have since passed away. So and we moved a few times, not as many times as you, but like but still you just feel a bit like you not having roots can feel it just makes you feel a bit disconnected. Especially when
mhm.
you maybe do want that. That's beautiful for some people. Some people absolutely love that. But for sometimes you just want to just a place to come back to and just kinda call your own,
That's
and
right.
it's funny, I think of some friends who absolutely have the childhood bedroom or their family has never moved in 30 years, and they're and, like, that's beautiful, like, there's something so nostalgic about that, but and then there's so many iterations in between, so I just wanna name that because that is very real. I think a lot of people can
Yeah,
empathize with what you're saying there, yeah. Really quick,
agree.
I just for myself, I have to ask, where in Sicily are you from? And I ask because John and I are looking to go there, so I'm very curious
Ah,
where you're from. Just sidebar, have any recommendations? Because, John, by ancestry, is Sicilian, so we're very excited to
oh,
go, but I was just curious.
okay. Palermo.
Palermo, okay, yeah, that's definitely on our list, of course, is Palermo. Amazing, okay, and then it sounds like you jumped around so much, so we're big Italy people here. I just have to ask, like, where else in Italy did you live? I'm living vicariously through you right now.
So I also lived in Pavia, which is in
Okay,
the region of Lombardy. I lived there for 3 years. And
okay.
then before moving to Canada, I was living in Milan. And I consider myself a Milan girl. Like I just love
Yeah.
Milan. It's like I'm a city girl. So I love Milan. I lived there for 5 years.
So cool. Milan is magical. We've been there like a couple times in very short stints. I need to spend some more time there, but that's amazing. Okay, so from Italy, you go to Canada. Talk to me about what brought you to Canada, however much or as little you want to share here. And again, just you've touched on what that transition was like for you a little bit, but anything else you want to share? Because that's definitely a bit of a culture jump there. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. Yeah, Canada was definitely a culture jump because like especially in Montreal, which is in the province of Quebec, there were I wouldn't call it cultural shocks, more like cultural discovery, because I feel like
Oh, I
shock has
love
a
that.
negative
Yes.
connotation.
Love that.
But for me, it was really like a big discovery. And I remember thinking, like, I've read about Quebec back in school, and I was like, Quebec, what the hell is that? And then, like, here I am. And I think the biggest shock was that when I was like in the airport first, when I first arrived, like everything was like in English and French, and I was like, what's going on here? And then what happened is like people when they would approach you, they would approach you both in English and French. So they would always say bonjour, hi. And usually, like actually not usually, French has more of a bigger influence, so everything has to be first French
Yeah.
and then in English. And I remember also like little things such as like seeing squirrels in the streets and in the park. I would not say that in Italy, and seeing this here, I was like, oh my gosh, they're gonna just attack me and eat me. And also remember, so there was a language, there was a squirrel situation, and of course, the weather. It was like actually the weather still is a big struggle. Like I've been living for
Mhm.
so long, and I don't think I can cope with the weather situation of Montreal
Yeah.
because it just gets cold and it snows, and then we have this phenomenon called freezing rain. I didn't even know what that was, and I was like, "What is this?" And it was just struggle with the freezing rain, especially because I think the first day, not the first day, but in the first year when I went to university, it was minus 40. And I was like, okay, there is no way
Oh,
I'm going to survive this. And then there was freezing rain. So for those who do not know, freezing rain is when it rains, but when the rain reaches the soil, it just becomes ice. And so when you're walking outside, it's like you're walking on an skating rink. So you have to put like
it's
this extra.
dangerous.
It is dangerous. They always like they always give warning. You have to be careful when you drive, when you walk outside, and you cannot. I wouldn't say you can walk with like snow boots. You need to have like these things underneath
Yeah.
the shoe so that you can like walk without falling. But I
It, like,
remember I
grips it or something
that's
almost, so you don't. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then I remember I fell, and all I was doing just looking around and hoping no one saw me, but I could not even get up. That's how slippery it
Oh
was.
my gosh.
Yeah. No, and I really don't like the winter, but I think I managed to, cope with it. And I think the beauty of Montreal is that it's so multicultural, and I love the fact that we do celebrate so many cultures. Like we always have festivals celebrating like different cultures. We have the Italian festival, we have the Korean festival. Like we have all these different festivals that happens throughout the year, which is really nice about Montreal. And but I think the other thing that I really had to struggle. I wouldn't say it was a struggle, but I'm finding myself now in living in Montreal, studying in English, which is not my first language, it's my third language, and now I work in
Right.
French, which is my fourth language. So I'm not even using languages that are mine to begin with. So I feel like that was a quite a shift for me, it,
Yeah.
which I don't think I ever gave enough credit to myself for doing that. I think I took it for granted, but I'm like, no, I should take credit for that. Like not
Yes, you
everyone can do
should.
it. So
That's hard,
yeah.
that's a lot. Oh my god. I have to say really quick, I'm always so, I guess, envious, if you will, of Europe is just so much better about educating from a very young age, the second languages, like here in the US, God, it is rough. I mean, we have language, of course, in school, but to really be able to speak it and work in it and all of it, like, we have a long way to go here, I personally feel. So I am so impressed by you, I just have to say, with how many languages that you know and can actually work with and, like, hold a job doing. And one of the things I know that I think we wanted to talk about prior to, like, coming on was language learning, and so just you kind of touched on it already, but, like, do you have any, like, maybe just advice, anyone here listening, or just anything to keep in mind or words of wisdom or anything in terms of learning a language or even multiple? Because like, John and I are studying Italian, but, like,
Well,
man, it's yeah, oh, yeah, but we are hardcore on this Italy thing, but it's tough when you're I shouldn't make excuses. There's really no excuse. But when you're like working in a job that's totally English and everyone around you speaks English and like we try and practice on each other, but then we're both like, are we actually saying this right? Because neither of us are like native speakers, so we're not wildly confident that we're saying things right, and it's a mess. So, what would you say to someone, just again, very quick, high level, trying to language learn here?
I think especially for busy professional, language learning can be challenging because you feel like you don't have time for it. But for
Mm.
instance, now I'm working on my Spanish, for instance, like which is my fifth one,
Good
and
for
I
you. Oh my
always
gosh.
I always try to make time for it. And I think
Yeah.
one thing that I really had to learn is that, first of all, there is no age for you when it comes to learning languages. I know people say, oh, like once you reach a certain age, it's much harder. Who cares? If I
Yeah.
want to learn
You can
it, I'm
still do
gonna
it.
learn.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think what's very good practice is to do some time blocking, especially when you're a busy professional. I
Mhm.
One thing that I do is, let's say I look up for like videos on YouTube that are like 10 minutes and I just actively listen to those and I do my job for the day, 10 minutes. Or
Yeah.
I also take classes like 20 minutes class with a tutor and we just talk in
Right.
in Spanish. It is quite challenging if I have to be honest sometimes because I
Yeah.
feel like my mind is always thinking in French and then suddenly I'm like have to switch and I can't do the switch right away. So it's a bit challenging. But
Yeah.
the more you practice the conversation, the better it will be. So I feel like with busy professionals, you really have to make an effort to block the time and to make it non-negotiable if that's your priority. And I think that's key to success, especially because you can always make an excuse, but if you truly want it, you can put
Mm.
that as your first thing in the list. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. We have, like, our kinda time set aside. It's, like, right before bed, we both kinda do our language learning. So it's like we do have that, but, like, during the day, like, I love that you just, like, take it to which we all need to be taking some breaks from work anyway. So why not use some 10, 15 minutes to language learn? I love that, and you're so right. If it is like anything in life, if it's a priority, you make the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
if
that
it
consistency, obviously, with language is very important.
exactly. And if you could add something else, I think what
Yeah.
could also help as well is that one thing that I used to do is that some of my coworkers, I would actually take time to use the lunch break to go on lunch with them, and then we would just speak in French. And that was my
So
way to
smart.
like to be productive and it was like a win-win situation. I'm having lunch with my friend and then I'm like also
Yeah.
practicing without paying an extra tutor. So that really worked for me for like my first years in Montreal. And I think it's
Yeah.
if you can have a coworker who's like native Italian speakers, you can also have that group conversation along with your partner and so forth. And I think that can really, really help because I feel like sometimes partners are like not the best like person to practice with.
Especially if the person's not native, which again, neither of us
Yeah.
are. So we're both like, "Are we even doing this right?" I don't know. Um, but that's so true. And the tutor, absolutely. These were great suggestions, by the way. Thank you. Yeah. I think it's tough here in the U.S. Sometimes we depending on where you are, you don't always have someone to practice with. So you do have to seek it out a little more. I don't want to speak for everyone. For us, we've definitely had to seek it out a little bit more. But again, if that's really what you want to do and it's a priority and or you really want to get proficient enough to work in that environment or where you need to know the language, like that's what you got to do. Yeah.
That's it.
I love it. Great advice. Okay, so I'm so excited to shift to this part of the conversation now because I want to talk about stories beyond borders. So your podcast, and because this is also where I really wanted to go with our conversation today, just exploring identity, which we've already kind of done, and belonging, but this life between cultures. And so I just want to open it up to you to like, first of all, tell us about that. But I'd love to hear from you too. Like, 'cause I'm sure you've spoken with so many incredible people and heard so many powerful stories if there's any like major, like, how do I want to this word this themes or takeaways or just things that you've learned from guests in having those stories.
Yeah, I think with Stories Beyond Borders, I wanted to create a platform for other people and guests to share their stories of immigration or their stories of being multicultural, living in between two cultures or multiple cultures. And I find it always so fascinating to hear all these stories because I think sometimes we just take it for granted that some
Yeah.
stories, like the reason why people move is just because we just want a better future. We just don't like our life in our home country. But honestly, it's not always like that. I think some people don't have a choice and they just have to leave their country. We just have to be we just have to like be aware that the reality sometimes is a little bit different for some people, and some people really just take one thing and just leave, and that's it because they have no other choices. I
Yeah.
think my favorite episode was with this girl that I consider my friend, and she talks about her experience being half black and half white.
Mhm.
But when you look at her, she just looks white. Like she doesn't look black. And
Okay.
if she did not tell me, I would have not guessed it. And so she's like, sometimes I feel like I just got way too many, privileges because of my skin color. And she feel like she was not able to embrace that other part of her identity.
Wow.
And I felt it was so interesting when she was saying that. I was like, some people probably would just go proud of like looking a certain way. But then she was like, yeah, I feel like I missed out, and I feel like also she was saying how her siblings had a different experience because they look a bit more like black, whereas
Yeah.
she just looked completely white. So she was like, I had really had to learn certain things when I was a kid. I also have faced some mental health issues and so forth. So that was my favorite like episode because she was just being very vulnerable, and I just enjoyed listening to her, and I could feel her honesty. So that was interesting. And then there was this other girl that I interviewed who was the reason why I have written my book. And I have read her own book called A Confession of a Brown Girl. And she talks about her experience being, she's Canadian Pakistani. So when she was talking about her life in the book, I was like, oh my gosh, this girl, she's just writing about my life. So I could just relate to it. I feel like there are so many things that people are able to relate to when we are sharing our stories, and that's why I say storytelling is so powerful. Like don't hide behind your story, tell your story. I think it's what creates community, creates engagement. You create a safe space for other also to share their stories, and maybe they won't feel alone in their journey. And so that's what I was trying to do also with the podcast.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Okay, wow. I almost feel like I need to talk to them too because how incredible. Like I'm always looking for more of those stories. That's so powerful. And again, it's like I just love that you're like reading her book and feeling so seen and so understood. And like I was saying earlier, right? You're different backgrounds, but there's so much like that we can all come together on in some of these and just like like a global way of there's a lot of people that are going through that in their own way, and that's so important. And I just praise you guys for talking about it so openly and very vulnerably. Like that's hard. Not everyone can do that or wants to do that. So that's amazing. And then you holding space for people like that on your podcast as well. That's incredible. It's so needed. Um, Wow, that's so powerful. So quickly talk about your book or your guide as well. So discovering your identity, a rebirth from interracial struggle. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so my book, it's like as I was mentioning earlier, it's really about my life growing up in Italy.
Mhm.
And I make a comparison between the two cultures, the Italian one and the Bengali one. And it's a mostly talked from a perspective of a South Asian girl who's like seeing things for the first time and experiencing things for the first time. And she finds herself in a space where she just has to explain herself to people, especially people
Mhm.
who don't all share the same culture. And it was very therapeutic for me because I was just sharing my memories, and I feel like I was just reliving a lot of those episodes as I was just sharing them. And of course, I think they just stayed with me because I just felt like they needed to be shared, but I was also probably seeking an answer from those episodes about why I would, I would reflect so much on some of these things. And I talk about certain things such as like my parents, for instance, they would tell me you're not allowed to participate to the religion class, because there was a perception that I would just,
Mhm.
you know, maybe change religion, who knows?
Right.
Uh, and I talk about that. I also talk about how some of my high school friends, they were allowed to go to school trips for longer days, for 1 day and so forth, but I was just not allowed to.
Aw.
And at the beginning, I thought it was for religion purposes, but then it turns out it was cultural purposes. And I was like, this was not fair. It was not
Yeah.
fair. And then there was this other part where I talk about how like people from the community would often ask my parents, "Oh, did you wish Urmi was a boy?" And and it did not bother me so much when I was a kid because I was like, "Oh, they're just asking a question." But now when I reflect upon it, I'm like, no, because there is a perception that boys can do, they can start doing things earlier. They can start working earlier. They can, be the breadwinner, and
Right.
they have less restriction on some of the things they can do. So the South Asian community is very gender biased. Like
Mhm.
women are allowed to do only certain things and forget about the rest, whereas boys have a lot more freedom and no one ever questions them for anything, like if you're going
Yeah.
out, where are you going? If you're traveling, like who cares? Women, it's just questions over questions, and sometimes I would not even try. I would not even try because I was like, I already know it's gonna be a no.
Yeah.
And there were movies. There were actually movies. And when I started to write about my book, there's this movie that I watched, and I don't remember the name right now, but she is based in Norway, and her parents are from Pakistan.
Oh, okay.
And when I was like watching this movie, I feel like this was exactly what I was also going through. So she's surrounded by a lot of like people from Norway, and all her friends are from Norway, and she's like rebelling against her parents. So she goes to the club, and she's like, dating this white guy, and then one day like she brings him over, and her parents, like her father, caught her with this guy, and then of course like her parents lost it. They were like, we will send you straight to Pakistan, and then we will fix you that way.
Oh my
And
gosh.
then when I was watching this movie, I was like, that's exactly how it was when I was growing up. Of course, I didn't do clubbing or things like that, but I know people who did that. That was the way to punish them.
Oh my God. Wow, that is so intense. Oh my gosh. I would be so curious to read this. I'm sure like the things that you have experienced and again navigating that and like you mentioned earlier like being on the younger side so you kind of don't like anything in life, you don't know what you don't know yet. So again, I can just only begin to imagine what it was like to feel that push pull of literally this country, this culture that you are immersed in and living in. But then, equally important, this home life, right? These are your parents, and you sound wonderful and didn't want to go against them. Um, but again, just that balance must have been very difficult to navigate, and like we were saying earlier, that's a lot to unpack as you get older, and it sounds like this was, like, maybe not a newer thing for you, but it took a while to really start maybe perhaps acknowledging that and being like, "Wow, okay, this is actually how this really affected me." Does that feel true to you? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it did affect me a lot because I really grew up with a lot of like limitations. Like I think I was just conditioned to think, women can only do certain things, and you should never go against like our wishes, what we tell you to do. But I feel like they would never put that much pressure on, let's say, on a male figure. I don't have any brothers, but I feel like like men are so highly valued in the South Asian community
Yeah.
compared to the women. And I know, for instance, like some of the things I have seen with my own eyes is that, let's say, when I would go back to Bangladesh, when my parents would bring me to get to know that part of the world, I could see how in a family where maybe we have one girl and one boy, like people are willing to invest into the education of the boy. And I was like, why is it like that here, And I can
Yeah.
see because there is a perception that the girl is just supposed to, she's gonna get married eventually. We just have to, like, there is a worry that as soon as a girl is born in a family, like, there is a worry that, okay, who's gonna take care of her when she reaches a certain age? But I'm like, why are we not
Right.
teaching her about independence, first of all? Like, why does she have
Yeah.
to depend on someone? So things like that are like really hard to unlearn for certain cultures. So I remember seeing that, like, the worry is that, okay, who's gonna take care of her? And some of the families, because they could not take care of their daughter, they would just send them off to marriage like at a really young age. And we also have an issue of like child marriages in Bangladesh where like young girls are sent off for marriages and they have not even fully developed like mentally, physically, psychologically, and there they are with someone married with someone who's like twice their age, and they're trying to
Yeah.
understand what am I supposed to be doing?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
scary. Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so much to unpack there. One thing I wanted to circle back to, because again, to bring it back to you and your part of the story and where you are in your life now, I would be remiss if I didn't quickly mention. So can you talk about this women's group that you're in and you're part of the Montreal chapter? Can you repeat what that was one more time and just tell us about that? Because I want to bring it back to that for a second because I just think that's so incredible and like what a beautiful way to like step into this new like iteration of your life, I guess, and be so empowered and yeah, I just love that for you. So can you just talk to us briefly about that?
Yeah, it's called Women in Leadership, and it's an organization that have been around for 25 years. It's based mainly in Canada, and
Okay.
each city of Canada has a chapter. So Montreal has a chapter, Toronto has a chapter, Vancouver has a chapter, and I run the Montreal chapter with other three women. And the goal with is really to empower the women in the community to be the leaders they're meant to be, and so we touch upon different things during the webinars, in-person events. We do brunches, we do networking events after work. Like we do a bunch of like in-person and online
Fun.
events. It's so much fun. Honestly, there's
To go.
so much fun. It's so much fun. And we have women to share their stories. Their stories of like being, let's say, working professionals while also being a mom, or maybe working professionals and dealing with like health issues. A lot of the times, the women are really looking for ways to, let's say, cope with imposter syndrome, self-doubt, insecurities, getting confidence. So it's very much, yes, it's about leadership, but it's more about all these traits that you need to have in order to be a great leader. So communication skills, public speaking skills, wellness, empathy, all these things that makes the woman a lot more well-rounded. And so
Yeah.
we have all this conversation, we have webinars. We actually had Women in Leadership Day 2 days ago. So we held a webinar where we had wellness coaches, we have two people, and we held a panel session where they were basically sharing practical ways to implement like wellness elements at workplace. So they were talking about mindfulness, they were talking about flexible Friday, where people can take the time off to do anything they want. They also, some people were talking about how they incentivize some people to use some extra money they are given to actually take cooking classes, painting classes.
I
So
love
it was
that.
really nice, honestly. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Oh, I love this so much. I'm so glad I asked about that because again, I just feel like it, in a way, ties into, again, and just this kind of like new iteration that you have found for yourself after, your upbringing, which,
Yeah.
that it's very nuanced, right? And so I was going to ask you really quickly. I mean, in this group, I would imagine you see a lot of women from a lot of different backgrounds, or is it a lot of women that are maybe like born and raised in Canada? Like, I was just curious about that.
We do have a lot of women who are from different backgrounds.
Mhm.
A lot of these women are, I think they're struggling more in finding a work-life balance. I think that's
Yeah,
what
that's
I
fair.
keep seeing as recurring. But I am
Mhm.
part of another organization called Dress for Success, where I mentor a lot of young people. And we just went to a networking event, and this South Asian girl approached me, and she was telling me, so basically she was like, I want to learn French, but every time I speak French, I don't like the way I sound, because she's like, I have such a strong like Indian accent when I speak, and I said, so what? That's
Right.
amazing. And so
Yeah.
it like, and I know I went through that, like this whole
Mhm.
accent thing. It's also something that I went through until I really had to like love my accent.
Yeah.
But I know I was always trying to get and sound like American, because I felt like that was the coolest one. But I know that
We're not that
also
cool. Just
I
kidding.
also to, I also had to learn, to embrace my accent. And when I
Yeah.
talked with this girl, I was like, no, girl, like you have to
Own
like
it. I
proud
love
of be proud of the accent. So I can see that in other environment when I'm
yeah.
connecting with other women, that the struggle it's like similar to mine.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. You are inspiring so many people. Again, hopefully anyone here listening today who can relate to your story at all can see themselves in you one way or another. And you are a part of so oh my gosh, you have so much on your plate. Can I just say, like you are a part of
So
so
much.
many incredible groups and the mentoring and everything. Like kudos to you, truly.
Thank
As
you.
we start to wrap up, because again, it sounds like you have just not only just living in other places, but travels as well. My last question for you today, just and again, answer this however you want, whether you do want it to talk more about just like in the moves and some of the places that you've lived, or just, some fun places you might have gone on trips. What are some of your biggest takeaways in your travels so far, whether it's, lessons learned or just places you would recommend going or anything to leave listeners with here today?
Oh,
I know it's a
goodness.
big question.
Such a difficult question, but let me tell you this. I went to Malaysia last year and I think it just stayed in my heart. I felt people in Malaysia are so nice. They're
I've
so
heard that.
adorable. They're so
Yeah.
cute. Like you just want to hug them when they speak and you're like, oh my gosh. And I can feel when I was in Malaysia, I feel like I learned a lot more about kindness towards other people. And that was my biggest takeaway when I left.
Oh, I love
And
that.
I really enjoyed Kuala Lumpur. Like for anyone who's looking for a destination, I think Kuala Lumpur is great. The food is amazing. And I just came back from Morocco and I felt the same way too. Like people are so like they go beyond and above to help you. That was another thing that I noticed. Um, and I also loved LA. I love LA.
I
I
did
love
not
Orange
see that
County.
coming.
I
That's
love
so
Orange.
funny.
I love Orange County. Like if I could live in Orange County, I was like I
You
love
would,
that
yeah.
part. I
Oh
love
my
it.
gosh, that's amazing. I listen, being here in California, I can agree. Orange County is absolutely
Yeah,
beautiful. It's very expensive, as is this whole
I
freaking state.
know.
But everywhere in the world right now seems very expensive. Can't escape it either way. That is so, so funny. But you know what? I hear that all the time. I get to hear that a lot from people in Europe. They love New York and LA, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not
New York
surprised.
too. I love New York as well. It's so
Yeah.
pretty. I
It's
love New
fun.
York.
It is really fun. I was there a few months ago, just for like 4 days, like in Manhattan and stuff. And because I grew up on the East Coast, so I'd been there multiple times, but I hadn't been there in a long time, like just by myself. And it was, it just has this fun energy. I love asking what countries and cities people love or have really changed you. Because first of all, just selfishly, we want to add them to our list of places to go. But I just love again, just expanding our horizons, but also like those things that you've learned or observed there. And that's what I love about traveling so much is like you go and like you are not the same person leaving. And so like I love what you said, right? You see how these people treat each other, treated you and the going above and beyond and all of that. And you take those things with you and it just I don't know. I like to think it makes us better people at the end of the
Yes,
day, hopefully too. And we take a
thank
little
you.
bit of everywhere we've been. It's beautiful.
It's come, you come with a lot more awareness, I feel like, because you
Yeah.
see how they live and you see
Mhm.
how you're treated, and then you're like, maybe I should be a bit more like that.
Yes, it's very humbling. You realize like this world and everything in it is so much bigger than you and our bubble that we get stuck in sometimes. And it's why we love traveling. It's so powerful
That's
and
it.
very eye-opening, if nothing else, right? So
I agree.
amazing. This was such a wonderful conversation. I feel like we covered so many topics in a good amount of time. So I love that. And I'm just so grateful for you to, coming on again, sharing your background, your story, which again, I think is so important. I think it's so good to just speak openly about it and for people to hear that, right? So anyway, I just thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
And before I forget, where can everyone find you? Your website or anything or social media links, where can people connect with you?
Connect with me on LinkedIn, and it's my name, Urmi Hossain. And if people want to find out about the work that we do with women in leadership, we
Yeah.
actually offer a lot of online events for free, like a lot of the webinars, panels, which are online. They're actually open to everyone
Oh, that's
and they can
amazing.
join them from anywhere and from anywhere in the world. So they can just Google like Women in Leadership Foundation Canada. All the different
Okay.
chapters do their own thing, but for online stuff, they can literally anyone can join them. And I think we have great resources. So if you can just Google Women in Leadership Foundation Canada, they can find out more about the work that we do for women in leadership.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for offering that up. I definitely want to check it out, like selfishly. So, but that will all be linked in the show notes as well. So, thank you again so much for your time. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and tuning into the Taste Toast Travel Podcast. We really appreciate you being here and hope you're enjoying these honest conversations about all things sipping, savoring, and seeing the world. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, we would truly appreciate a rating or a review on whatever platform you're tuning in on, so fellow foodies, Epicureans, and travel enthusiasts can enjoy this content too. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a follow at Taste Toast Travel. We'll see you in the next episode.